Hi, welcome to Building SaaS with Python and Django. My name is Matt Lehman, and I am the streamer for the stream, and we work on a Django application that I build. And my goal is to teach you what I know about Django and see a real application in progress as we work through the details of the application. So tonight we're going to work on some of the issues that I have for the application. I've got them displayed here. There's no way we're getting through all of them because some of them are pretty beefy, but we're going to work through some of them and as a process to show you how you can systematically make progress on an application. So there's some software development ideas behind this. There are some testing strategies that you might apply, Django development patterns that you might apply, all sorts of stuff that you can learn from. So that's what we're going to do tonight. I do have a chat up and available, so if you have any questions, ask me anything about Python, Django, or web development, and I'll be happy to answer those. I do ask that you keep the chat civil, though. I post stuff to YouTube, and I'm here on Twitch, obviously, but there's other ways you can get in touch with me. I'm on Twitter as MB Lehman. I have a Patreon on MB Lehman as well if you want to contribute financially. There's all sorts of ways you can find out about me. There's all of that information can be found at mattlehman.com, which is linked up above. So that's kind of where we stand. Let's get into it. I've been thinking about what I want to do tonight, and I think it boils down to I don't really know what I want to do tonight. So I want to get motivated into what's here, and sometimes it makes sense to just run headfirst into whatever task is in front of you, and try to work on that. So some of these tasks are more challenging than the others and are going to be easier to communicate via stream. So we'll focus on the ones that I think are going to be the most approachable from the stream's point of view. And you'll see my process for how I work through bugs, basically, because a lot of these are you could either consider them bugs or you consider them new features and new things that my customer said that she wanted that the current app doesn't do. So whether you view them as bugs or features, it doesn't really matter. We've got some issues to work from. So looking at this list of tasks that are available, this was all information that was provided to me by my customer, who happens to be my spouse, and she gave me feedback about the app. It's a homeschool application. It's for dealing with homeschool schedules, and so that's what all of the context of this stuff is. So I think the first place to start is probably this issue right here, issue 72. We'll open it up. I'll give you some context for what it is. We'll look at the app, try and make sense of it, and then we will dive into the code and probably write a test first to see it fail in the context, and then make the test pass. That's the strategy that I usually use for these kind of things. Is if I can write an automated test to prove that something is wrong, and then write the specification for what it should be, and then make that thing pass, then you have pretty good confidence that what comes out the other side will be something that works. So let's bring up a terminal and bring up the app and dive right into it. And I guess let's talk about the issue first so we have some frame of mind for what it is. It's talking about a view of the application where the application presents a week's view of here's everything that's happening for the week for the students. And maybe the best way to show that is by showing it. So we'll fire up the application here, and you can see what's going on. So here's the week's view of content. And the stuff that my wife wanted to hide that is associated with this example are any courses that don't happen to be meeting at that time. I have on the course model this notion of when a course meets. And so sometimes my wife has told me that there will be courses that aren't going to meet for that part of the year. A good example is if it's a school year, but maybe they're breaking it up into trimesters or semesters, and even though it's a course for the whole school year, at the point of the school year where she's doing work, is not meeting on any days, so she doesn't want it to appear in the schedule at all. And in the modeling, that's handled by a field. And I will open up the model so we can look at that diagram again, so you can all get a good sense of what's going on. So we've got the course model, and this is the thing that we need to work against. And there's this days of week attribute that I added on here. There's other ways that I could have done this, lots of other ways, in fact. But the way I decided to model it was to make this a single field that uses a bit mask. And if you've never encountered bit masks before, it's kind of a binary concept, but the idea was I'm going to use a bunch of powers of 2 to indicate the bit positions of each day of the week. So there are 7 days of the week, and if we wanted a course that met on no days, the value would be 0. Because the reality is, if each day is given a single bit in a binary number, it would look like something like this. I'm going to put it in the chat of 7 zeros. Okay? But ultimately, the representation of that as an integer in a database is still going to be 0. So if I wanted a course that only met on a particular day, then I've given each of the positions in those 7 numbers a certain power of 2, because powers of 2 correspond to the different 0 and 1 positions of a binary number. So let's look at the model and make that really concrete. So there's an abstract model they use to model this, because there's actually this is used by a couple things. It's used by particular courses, but also the school year can decide on how many days of the week is a normal school year. So for instance, an average school year is going to meet Monday through Friday every week. And I wanted to be able to represent that too, because not every school does that. So you can see what I've done is I've assigned each day a certain power of 2 bit position. So the way to interpret this is that Monday is meeting in the first position on the number, down on this end. You can't see what I'm highlighting. Down on the right side. You know what? That light is flickering. I'm going to go turn that off. I'll be back with you. Sorry about that. So if we had a class that only met on a Monday, it would look something like this. It would be 6 zeros followed by a 1. So that's that 1 position. And if we had a class that met on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, it would be all of the 5 low order bit fields of the different numbers. And so this would be 0, 0, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. Okay? So that's the low order bits. And that translates to, 2 to the 5th power. So in the database representation, all of these numbers are stored in a single value. And what I have in the model code is some logic to do some bitwise operations to pull that information out and show which when these courses meet. Okay, so that's the context for how I chose to do modeling of these fields. If I was sticking purely with like Postgres or something like that, there are different field types that I could use in Django that might do this better, or might do the same kind of thing, just keeps the actual details of bitwise manipulation out of your point of view. And I think the Postgres has something called an array field, which I think maps pretty closely to this. There's also a package called Django Bitfield that does something very similar to this concept as well. But I didn't want to bring in an external package just for something that at least from my point of view, is fairly well scoped. I mean, it's only ever going to be 7 days. It's not getting any bigger than that. So I chose to do it this way. It's maybe I don't know that it's the best way. It is a way to do this, and it's a way that I'm choosing to handle this in the future. All right, so that gives us enough context for how to actually think about this problem. And so the problem is this: when a course is not meeting, so none of the days of the week are selected. In other words, if you translate that to a number, it'd be 0, right? Then what we want to do is not display that in the views that are presented. And there's 2 views that are primary. There's this weekly view that shows everything that's happening for the school week. And then there's also a daily view that shows everything that's happening for that. So what I need to do is add an extra check into this. And we can probably simulate this in the test data. So what I have here is just a bunch of test data that we can modify. So let's go in and tweak some stuff and see how this is going to fail, because it is going to fail right now. So let's come into Math 2. It's one of the courses. We're going to edit the course. So you can see that this course is currently set up to run 5 days a week. But if we disable all the days and update that, and then come back to the daily view, you can see, well, it looks like Math 2 is already out of the equation on the daily view, so that's good. But I think that's maybe not the case for the weekly view. Yeah. So here's an example of the thing we have to try and remove. The week view does not consider this as something to exclude. So there's going to be an extra bit of conditional logic here. When it's fetching all of the data for all of the courses, it needs to do one additional check. It needs to say, are you not meeting on any day? And that is the value of 0. And we either need to give that a constant or, yeah, I'm not sure the best way to represent that yet. But we'll get to that because you can see here that I've represented each particular day, and each day has a number, but we're going to need a new constant for that scenario where you have no days. But that'll be part of the code that we write. So it looked like it was working on the daily view, which is good. It must be a side effect of how I'm querying for that day's data. And we just need to make it work on the weekly view. So we're going to write a test for the weekly view, and the test is going to add a course that runs on no days, and it should not appear in the output. That's the thing that I want to do assertions on, that it's not present in the list of courses. So let's go to the test views file for the core, which is where that week view is. And the view right now has a name of app because it's meant to be more than just a weekly view. So this is where we're going to work from. So the challenge with this main view is that it has a lot of data as well. And that makes it a little bit sticky to test because there's just, like, as you can see, there's just a ton of stuff that's expected to be part of this thing. I mean, here's one test, and even for my taste, the setup is getting a bit crazy. So that's what we're working from here. And a lot of that is because the week view has to set up a lot of data to represent this. So there's maybe some refactoring that maybe makes sense to happen in this test case as well, to consider what is the stuff that's common to a lot of these tests that we could pull out and just share between the tests, because I'm doing the same thing over and over again. And for instance, the school year seems to be pretty commonly used by a lot of these. So that's maybe something that we could consider. Yeah. So let's write the test first, and then write it with the version that is not most efficient, and then look at that, make sure that the code change works, And if we're happy with that, then we can commit that change and then work to do the refactoring. That might be a good thing, good process to go through. Because if I'm going to continue to add to this particular view, if this is the main dashboard view of this, and this is where all of the tests happen, I want these tests to be tight. I want them to like be understandable. And as you can see right now, I mean, I know this model very well. And even for me, it's like, wow, that is just a ton. And I don't really know that I understand everything that's going on here. So let's jump to the bottom of this. And here's the last spot of the test case before it moves on to the next one. We're going to say def, and I'm going to give the test a name. And we'll call it test do not show course when no days. Not a super name, but I think it's good enough. And so the thing that we want to test, well, let's go copy and paste some data for now to work from. So we want to work from the weekly view that has a schedule. This is kind of like the happy path test, and then we're going to tweak it and change the course that is part of that. So all of this stuff, in fact, we have to mock out time zones and stuff to make it all line up. There's like a lot of stuff going on these tests. So let's add the mock to time zone. And the mock was there in order to make sure that the test data is 100% consistent all the time, because this week view is very dependent on a week, like a set of dates. And normally what it's doing is asking what is the current time right now and doing all of its calculations from that. So the week view, unfortunately, by the nature of being time bound, means that you have to like freeze time for all of this stuff as well. It's just a side effect of what it is. So we're going to take all of this data that's here, and it's a full complement of data. And I'll explain some of it as we go along, but I don't need to go over all of it. And if you have any questions about anything that I'm doing, please use the chat. I'm here to try and teach and make progress on a project at the same time, but I don't want to leave anybody totally behind. Okay, so we're anchoring the time into a certain date time, and then it's set at a UTC, so it's a time zone aware, and then we set that time as the local date return value, because this week view depends on, it just looks at the local date, and the local date is a date instance that is local to the time zone. So that's what it's doing. And there's some framing around the week boundaries, because that's part of the assertion. So there's a Sunday and Monday that's added here of when this is occurring. And so Sunday, so it must be that January 26th of this year was a Sunday. Otherwise, I would not have written it this way with giving it this name. And we'll just take that on faith at this point, because I'm not going to bring up the calendar every time I want to look at this test. So that's what we've got. And then that's the time zone setup. And maybe there's that can be even by itself something that we extract as a function potentially. I'm not sure yet. The other bits that are here is we have to make a user that is the person that logs in, and that user is going to need some data. Like if we look at this big view, there's a lot of stuff going on here. So there is a student, which is, this is my son's name, and underlying this is just implicit in this whole thing is a school year, and all the courses are part of a school year through a relationship via a grade level. and each of those school years, each of those courses has tasks that need to be done as well. So in order to even like present something meaningful, like to get into an individual cell, you have to get through about 4 or 5 different models worth of stuff all built together, which is why there's so much stuff in this test. So we have our student, we have our school year, the next level below the school year is the grade level, next level below that is the course, then we've got a few tasks, then we have some work that shows that tasks have been completed, and then we have to do an enrollment to show that the student is in that grade level. That's what even shows it on there at all. Without the enrollment, the student has no work to do because they're not part of the grade. So that's all that stuff. And now we need to think about what the assertion is on the other side and what we want this to be. So actually, in fact, I'm going to take the expected schedule here and just take this whole thing. Oops, that's the wrong test. That would fail. So we took it from, well, where did we take it from? I took it from this test weekly view, which must be the main. Is that right? Nope, that's not right. Which? See, this is another problem. There's so much data. It's hard to keep track of which one I even took it from. Looks like this one. So let's take this schedule for the moment. And the easiest way to test if I pulled it from the right one is to see if the test will pass. Okay. Yeah. So the test passed, so I pulled the right schedule. What we really care about for this test is not this whole schedule. That test was meant to be the exhaustive test of is all the data exactly right, and so it's just way too much. In fact, the result that I really want from this thing is I want to make a course that meets on no days of the week. So it really needs to look like an empty course list, because I'm only going to put a single course into the test, so the data should just be empty. Like that. And by doing that, what I do is I take out we take out this stuff because that's not needed. So we have a course here. There's actually 2 courses, but we don't need 2 courses. We just need a single course. And I don't need to test for the number of queries either. That was done in that other test. So that's data that we don't need. We're going to have a course factory, but we're not going to care about asserting on anything about that course. So again, we just care that the thing is going to be empty. The course list, I should say. So we've boiled this down to everything that's here. It looks like we don't even need this Monday. It's not used by anything. And if I run this, we get not the right thing. And we get a course 0 showing up. But I haven't actually changed the course data. So of course we'd get course data to show up on that regard. And we haven't modified the actual code to do the right testing for the thing. So even after I change it to show up on no days, it'll still probably appear because we've not modified the behavior of the view. But now we need to get to that core models and give us an extra thing to define the constant for days of the week. And so I think I want to say, what do I want to call this constant? The best I can think of is like no days and have that be 0. So then that says that would change this school, no, not the school year. That would change the course to be course no days, like that. So that feels right to me, because now it very clearly, in my mind at least, says what this is supposed to be. So it's a course factory. It's connected to the particular grade level that we just created, which is connected to the school year, which is associated with the user, and it runs on no days of the week. So even though we need at least one task in here, otherwise it may not query everything. So let's take the course task factory and throw on one task. So I guess we do need that course. And yeah, I'm wondering if there might be ways to simplify even that, but this is good enough for now. So I think this is the reflective of the actual test that we care about. Now this is representative, though, of the real failure and that real problem that was present, which we saw over here, that even though this course was set for no days, it's still appearing in the list. So if we want to test that, we need to go to the view and modify the view to actually change that logic. So let's go to that view. So here we're in the app view, and this is a pretty complicated view. I apologize that there's no getting around that. We have to get to each of the schedules that are there and just get into the weeds. This is just the way that it happens. So the way this works is it builds up, it finds out the week that we're considering, and then it says, like, what are the schedules for each of the students that are in that week, and passes a bunch of data into the view to do all this calculation. And then you can see the real bulk of it here is handled in this get student schedule function or method. Then it's appended to the schedules. And so what appears over here, this whole table of data, is what I consider a schedule. And there's a schedule for each student. So I have 2 students, 2 schedules. So we need to dig into this get student schedule, and this is where the magic needs to happen. So what happens is it loops over each course in the courses and then does some query stuff. So I think we can basically short circuit this whole process by saying, what can we say? It might be a pretty basic assertion or basic guard clause. So we can say if the course dot days of week is equal to course dot no days, then continue. That may be it, except that we don't have the course model imported, but we can do that. So we import the course model. And so hopefully this is pretty logical to you. It's an assertion that says if you're not meeting here, don't bother collecting anything, just move on. And now if we run our test, the test passes. It's pretty cool. In fact, I bet if we come back here, the web server is still running, and it noticed that we modified some stuff. If we refresh this page, math 2, which was set to meet on no days, is no longer here. That's really cool. So I think that fixes the actual issue that we're trying to resolve. So the question is now, do we stop there? Is that how I want to stop? Because this solves the problem. It has a test. It's checking for the condition of there are no days for that view, and does everything that I think we want to do. I think, though, I don't want to stop, ideally, because this is nasty to me. Like, look at all that you have to get to understand this test. This is what I don't like about this. In my mind, the key lines of this test are: here's a course that meets on no days, and here is the other side of it. In fact, I don't even like this assertion anymore. I want to refine this. So, I always forget what the function is to get it out. I think there's a get context. So we want to do schedules equal self get context schedules. All right, and then we want to change. We want to say, what do I want to say? I want to say that the course's key of schedules is empty. So we could change that to assert not. No. It's not equal. Is there an empty? I don't remember. I've been using PyTest so long that I forget a lot of the older assert styles. It's not empty. Well, how can you check? Well, the simplest thing we can do is we could say assert equal, and then the actual value is schedules courses. And we could check that against the empty list, like that. And run that test. Oops, I did something wrong though. Schedules is a list. What did I do? Hold on. Oh, okay. It schedules as a list because it's one schedule per student. So, and it even has, it's plural in the name, so I should have known better. So we could say, go back to here, and really it is at index 0. Like that. So that's a tighter assertion to show that we want the courses for that particular schedule. That seems a little better. And I'm still not crazy about, let me bring up the unit test documentation. Like I said, it's been a while since I did unit test. I feel like there's a better way to check an empty thing. In this list should be the list of assertions somewhere. Apologies for the scroll. You're there. So we can't do a straight up true because that does an actual test. Although, okay, it's checking the bool of this. So what if we said assert false on this? I'm wondering if that starts to lose meaning though. Because what happened? An empty list in Python, if you do a bool operation on it, it is false because it's empty. That's what that's the definition of it in Python, is that an empty list has no value, so it must be interpreted as false, which gives you that nice syntax of saying like, if my list or if not my list, to give you the opportunity to like skip a list that's empty. And I think this feels decent to me, because the way I'm reading this now, it's saying like, no, I'm sorry. Let's change that back. I want it to be clear that this is an actual list object. Okay, so that tightens up the assertion. Let's now revisit this for the viewpoint of all of this other stuff. A lot of these tests have a common school year. They have a grade level. It's just wiring from test to test. I'm making the same thing happen over and over again. And a lot of that stems from they're following the same pattern of here is, me pulling out the date, pulling out that stuff that's in there. And the challenge with it is some of these things that we assert on care about some parameters and some don't. Like if I've got a Monday here, and we just saw that other test didn't need the Monday at all. So in fact, I deleted it because it was just extra stuff that wasn't helpful. So if I extracted this commonly, like, is that going to be beneficial? Yeah, probably will be. I can probably get out enough to say, here is all the way up to perhaps a grade level. Because unless it's dealing with multiple grade levels, which maybe one test is, I don't remember. That's going to be common across them. Like each of these tests, as I'm looking at them, they care, or many of them, I should say, not all of them, they care about a grade level. Okay, so how are we going to do that? I think let's try extracting the method and seeing what breaks on a test, and then see if we can start to introduce that to other tests. So let's come into this first one that satisfies that criteria. It has the school year, it's got the grade level, it's got all of this stuff, and I think it is a good candidate. So right now I'm going to put the helper method like right above it, but eventually we'll probably move it so it's just not in the middle of the set of tests. And we'll say, what can we call this? Maybe make grade level. And I don't know what it's going to take as parameters yet. But we're going to rip out, well, let's assume that it returns a grade level and say make grade level. And for the moment, make it pass. So we haven't done anything yet. Test still passes because it's really a no-op. That's what's happening right now. And if I did this backwards, we could do that. We could say take the grade level and pull it up here. And you're going to immediately see my editor say like, whoa, whoa, whoa. You can't do that. Now school years, what's this school year that you're talking about? So let's continue to work that in reverse. Let's put the school year up here. And now you see, well, now we need the user and the Sunday. And we haven't even returned anything yet. So really, we also need to do a return on the grade level. And technically, I don't even need to give it a name here. We could just return directly. Okay, so we've got that, and the, well, that's interesting. What is going on? Oh, I have a second school year for this test because it only wants to pull the school year for that user. So even that, like I was already lost on what is this test doing. So we need the user as well, but the difference is I want to pass in the user. I don't want to be forcing this grade level helper to create the user. I think that's something that the test can do, because maybe we'll see. Which means that now the grade level comes here, and we'll pass in the user. But you can still see we're still missing the Sunday on the attribute there. And that the way that I define this school year was trying to just give a bounding range. So it's not really like Sunday that matters. It's really the week date. Because it just needs to have something that the school year is true for. Because by default, the factory will make a school year that's like from now into a year in advance, and yeah, that's not always helpful for this particular view. So the other thing I need to do is pass in the Sunday. All right, if I did everything right, the test still passes. So what has this done for us? It's cleaned up the fact that the grade level is just a bunch of setup data. Can we go further? That's what I'm wondering. Like, should I? Because the other aspect of this is I don't want this helper method to have to know that the test is mocking out time zone. So I'm not going to pass in the mocked out time zone, for example. And so that means that the date that's here, like, it just doesn't feel right to add this stuff to the helper. I could pass in or make the user not something that gets passed in. But if I do that, there's a bunch of other things, like the student needs a user, the user gets used down there, and so it seems weird to have grade level be also returning a user. So I think I want that to be something that stays in the test. So now I'm wondering, like, how much is this really buying me in this circumstance? It's making the school year, it's making a grade level, that's all well and good. Maybe I should ask the next question of, should this also make, instead of making the grade level, should it make a course? Because in what circumstances am I going to want the course to be not created at the same time? Challenge is that this view, I was also accounting for some like edge cases. So if you look at this, you see the school year is a standard Monday through Friday. But I deliberately designed this just so that Tuesday is not in this list, you might notice. And that was so that I could have some days be empty and check some edge cases that what happens when you have gaps in your course. And so I think I did that kind of in a lot of these. But I do think that overall, this is cleaning up quite a bit of these, like, especially because of the way that the black tool that I'm using is doing auto formatting and making this school year super long. It's feeling like a good thing to extract that out. So maybe that's a good enough cleanup for now. And if I come up with a better strategy in the future, to put together a bunch of data that is representative that I can use over and over again, I can do that. But the downside of trying to do this too much, and the reason I'm a little hesitant on all of this stuff, is that if you have a lot of shared test data that is shared across your tests, then if you ever need to change that data, because you will need to change that data, you'll need to add something to it or change some parameters of it. It could have ripple effects for your test suite, and things that you didn't want to touch suddenly are reflected differently because of some maybe what you thought was minuscule change, but it cascades throughout your app. So I'm going to put this at the top of this test as an indicator of saying, hey, here's a helper method that's part of this test that is commonly used for a lot of these test states. And then we're going to go through and clean it up where we can. So we'll look for instances of grade level. And this is our first time where we used it. And we can come down here, and here's the next time that it's used. And we can get rid of these two lines, because I think that's all it's ended up doing, right? Just those two big lines. Yeah, the school year and the grade level factory. So make grade level. And we'll do it again. It's like, well, this one doesn't even have a grade level. So you can see it doesn't apply to all the tests, because not all of them have this stuff. Here's an instance. Yep. And I know cleaning up tests is not the most fun thing to do. Well, maybe it is for you. I don't know. I don't know you. It's not the most fun thing for me to do, I should say. But it does help when, I'm very fresh with this code relatively. And even in this circumstance, I've looked at this code and being like, oh, that caught me by surprise. I didn't expect it to do that. Because there's so much data to try and absorb. And by fixing those things up, I think we sort of make our lives easier. And you just make the test tighter. There's still a lot of data in this test file and in these individual tests. But I don't know. I feel like that was a positive change. And I don't know, is there anything else we should change, I wonder? Because the other thing we might change is, what is another thing that's just like pure grunt work for this? Maybe we want to factor in the enrollment for the student. So like, let's go back and look at the examples where the grade level is used. Here's a grade level. And the student is right here as well. And the enrollment is right there. And here's the next make grade level. And there's a student, and there's an enrollment, and I don't think they're used for any other purposes. So it might be another thing that might help as well. Because in all these tests, I only really care about what is the schedule of the student. And so there has to be some data there to show up, to appear at all. So the challenge is, well, here's the challenge. The expected schedule on some of these will have the student in there. So I need access to the student in some of these things. And so I'm not sure where to put that. Like I could conceivably make another parameter go in there. So I could change it to be, instead of make grade level, it could be like make enrolled student or something like that. And it could return a tuple of the student and the grade level. Maybe that's the right way to go. But then do we need that every time? So every time we use make grade level, is the enrollment used? It's used in this one. It's used in this one. It's used in that. It's used in that. And it's used in this last test. So I think all of these use that enrollment concept. So that's feeling kind of good. So let's just try that for now. Let's change it to take out, well, come back up to the top. So let's add the student in here and remove it from all of the other tests and see what breaks, and see if we have to change the return. I think we are going to have to change it to return student. In fact, I know we're going to have to change it, so we might as well do that in advance. So we've got our grade level, and we've got, that's going to return this for the moment. And just check that everything's still working. Now, let's find our first example of a student. We'll take the student out of this line, and it should break, yep, it breaks that enrollment. So we're going to put the student here. And it's not used yet. So we're going to also take this and put the enrollment here. So now anytime that this thing makes a grade level, it's going to add a student as well. So it's starting to do a lot. So the name of make grade level feels a bit like a lie to me at this point. So let's call it what it is. Let's make student enrolled in grade level. Let's be really explicit for now until we can find out otherwise. And so that's still returning a grade level. There's going to be a bunch of failures now because I renamed that function. In fact, yank. Come on. Okay. So I think this should fail because, whoops. So one of them's doing a bunch of extra work now. The other one, what failed? And the other downside of this, and you might have seen what it was, is this thing was asserting on a certain number of queries. Oh, I see. I've got, I didn't actually clean up all the junk for a bunch of these. So let's go back to every one of these and say, this is the first one that was used, I think. And I deleted the student and the enrollment. That was the right thing to do. But I need to go to the next one, and I need to delete the student, and I need to delete the enrollment, because those things are going to be handled elsewhere. But that's going to cause a failure because the student is expected as a variable. But let's move on for a moment. Let's delete the student and the enrollment. And then I'm just going to use my tools highlighting to highlight the failures, and we'll come back and clean up. So delete the student and the enrollment, and the student and the enrollment. All right. So that test passes, but this test right here won't pass because the student is not defined. It's a name error. So we need to change the return of this new helper method so that it will actually return both. So let's come back to the top, and we'll change the thing to return both the student and the grade level as a tuple. And if we run all these now, we're going to get a bunch of errors because there's the tuple unpacking will fail in a bunch of places. And, well, that is not what I expected. Oh, okay. So something didn't fail in the way I thought it was going to fail, but it's still wrong. So anytime we go have one of these, we're going to add student to the beginning. Okay. So we're back to all of our test passing. That's cool. We've done a little bit of refactoring. We've got the student, we've got the grade level. A bunch of these don't necessarily need the student. Like you can see this one doesn't care about the student. Goes on to the next test. It's not here at all. And I think what's happening, the reason my linter is not complaining about it is because I'm telling the code that I have to do tuple unpacking here. Like I'm taking, the return of this is a tuple, and I'm trying to unpack it. But if I don't care about the student, I can change this to something that might indicate that it's not relevant. I don't know that that's worth it though. So what do we have now? We have a new helper method that creates the school year, grade level, student, and enrollment, 4 pieces of data that were used in a lot of these tests. And then I sprinkled it into the half a dozen or so tests that actually needed that. And by doing that, it probably cleaned up quite a bit of the actual tests. And we can see quite a bit of red that gets removed here. So, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 lines gets condensed down to 1. So that's kind of the test refactor that you like to see. And it's reusable enough that like these are not aspects of the test that I'm likely to change. And to be very clear, like if I did need some test data to be different, like if I needed the school year for this weekly view to be running on different days of the week, my recommendation is to not try and add a bunch of knobs to helper methods. So I could say like, I could add an extra thing of days of week, which would be, what would be like school year dot Monday plus Tuesday plus all that stuff, and go like that and make it optional and then set that there. I don't recommend that, because I think what will happen is you'll end up with these hard to use helper methods that have so many attachments and things that you have to be concerned about that you'll just end up being lost in them. So in those cases where you need specialized data, I think it's okay to use a factory to help with that. Yeah. That's my feeling on that. And really, the thing that we're really needing in a lot of these scenarios is a few pieces of information. And a lot of this might actually be condensed. So let me give it this one last pass of thought before I say this is good enough. Because what is this? What are the pieces of information that really matter here? If we pull all this together, what I want out of this test method is a student enrolled in a grade level. That was the name that I gave to the method. The enrollment factory can do a lot of this stuff. Okay, so if we go to the place where enrollment is defined, that's in the students app. So if I go to students factories, we're going to see this. Here is the enrollment factory. And it uses two subfactories. It uses a student factory and it uses a grade level factory. And I want to say that we could probably rewrite the entire body of this thing using a single enrollment factory call. In fact, let's try it. Okay, just making sure all the tests pass, and I'm going to add them to the stage of version control. So if I'm not happy with this change, I can revert this aspect. So let's rework this as an example. And I'm just, for the moment, I'm going to copy out all this, comment out all this stuff. And I'm going to create an enrollment of an enrollment factory. And the enrollment has access to the student and it has access to the grade level. I'm going to start to see where I'm going with this. Tests are going to fail out like crazy, I think. Well, not like crazy, but there's going to be a bunch of failures. Because the enrollment factory that I made, it wasn't connected to a school year associated with the user. So that's important. So that, like this by itself is not sufficient for what we need to do. But I think we can get there because the grade level is connected to a school year. And so we can say grade level, and we need to go up to the school year. And we need the school. And we want the user school. That's how to set the that first part. And then we can set more attributes on this particular school year. So we'll say the school year. And in fact, let's copy these two lines and bring them down here. And I don't know how this is going to look in the end, but we'll try it. Let's uncomment the line and join it together. And I want to delete all this stuff and have this. Okay. And similarly, we'll uncomment this line and we'll delete from here on, join them together. And now we've got, well, what's going on? I've got a syntax error. Hey, that Northern Monkey. I actually don't know what Bang YouTube is. I've not set up. Do I have, you know what? I'm not savvy enough on Twitch to know exactly what you're even saying. Do I have my VODs up somewhere? Is that my link to my YouTube? Is that what you're asking? Sorry for not being up on the lingo for Twitch. I guess I'm getting old. Oh, I'm missing a comma. There it is. Okay. But yeah, to answer your question, that Northern Monkey, I do have a YouTube site where I do video on demand stuff. And let's find it. So here I am. I'm on YouTube, and I have a playlist too, which is all of these streams. So you're welcome. I post them like usually next day if you want to catch up with something that you might have missed. So you're free to check that out. And thanks for the question. Appreciate it. I should figure out how to set up chatbots and all of those other things. I've just never taken the time to do that. Oh, no problem. Okay, so what do we have here? We've got Black doing some really nasty looking formatting on this. Okay, I'll try and wrap it in parentheses again because that seemed to help. And do the same here. So now what I've built out is I've said I've handled this line, this line, and this line of the school year factory. And I'm going to actually lean on the fact that the default for a school year for any model actually is Monday through Friday. Like that, I didn't really need to say that. I guess I put it in there in case I ever change the default, but realistically, I'm not going to do that. And so now what this is doing is the enrollment is going to create those with the proper school year attributes. And we also need to create a student that is also associated with the school. That's the other important connection. So we need to say that the student that gets created, that the school for that student is the user school as well. So I think, yeah, look at that. Cool. Green, well, it's not green, it's black dots, but a passing test suite. So I've taken all of these factory calls that I had wired together myself, and I'm starting to take advantage of the fact that Factory Boy, the tool that I'm using to build up model instances, does that stuff for you. You just need to give it the right attributes. So it makes this helper method be a very small wrapper around using Factory Boy. And frankly, that is a pattern that I have really grown to like. In fact, just today, in my professional day job, we use PyTest, and we use fixtures. And fixtures in PyTest they're interesting if you've never used them before. I'll give you an example of what it might look like. This project's not using PyTest, so I can't show it in reality, but you can use your imagination. If you have a PyTest fixture, what you do is on any test method or function that you have, you put in the fixture name. So, if my fixture was a function named myCoolFixture, then what PyTest will do is we'll look for a fixture that matches that exact name and automatically bring that into scope and execute that thing before the body of your test method. So it's kind of like our helper method that we've made today, except that they do that with input parameters. I have very mixed feelings about fixtures. They're powerful, but at the same time, I hate them. And hate's a really strong word. I don't like them very much in some ways. And the biggest way is that you don't know where it's coming from. This syntax, I didn't have to import this. So PyTest does a bunch of stuff under the covers and sort of creates this global registry of fixture functions that you can add in, and then you just add them to your tests. And that can lead to some confusing scenarios, in my opinion. If you like fixtures, more power to you. They're interesting. Anyway, though, getting back to what I was doing, we also use Factory Boy at work because it's my job. I work at Doctor On Demand, and it's a big Django application, big project. And Factory Boy is a great tool, so we use it there too. And I took to a fixture and kept the fixture in place because it's used in thousands of tests across the board. And I ripped out the implementation, which was a bunch of like handcrafted stuff to create a certain objects, and replaced them with factory calls, and saw, at least in my preliminary analysis, like a 15% speed up on a test suite that is nearly 20,000 tests long and takes a long time to run. So the point of this is that factories are a really powerful tool that you can use as the implementation or the guts of helper methods. So you can still, if you want helper methods that are well named and return certain things, that's cool, because it is kind of nice. Like if you look at this example, if I had to do this enrollment factory call in every single one of my tests, that would be pretty ugly. So avoiding that is nice. But at the same time, I'm using the benefit of a factory boy here to get that cleaner way of doing this without writing a bunch of glue code for me wiring the different pieces together. Yeah, I think that's what I want to add to that. So what does that leave us with? We've got this refactored helper method, and we still have a passing file. Let's just make sure the whole suite's passing. This only takes a second. So all the tests are passing, and we've solved our problem for the night. And that problem, as a reminder, was like, well, what happens when a course doesn't meet at all on the schedule? Like, should you not show it? And according to my customer, the answer is no, you should not show it. So it's not an empty row in the weekly view. And so that brings us kind of to the end of what I wanted to do today. I think we solved one particular issue. I walked you through my process. I walked you through like how I think about this stuff. It's really all about writing an automated test that you can to prove that the final state is not what it's expected to be. In this case, it was showing a row when it shouldn't have showed a row. And then crafting the right assertion to prove that it was failing. So we started with a failing test, and then we wrote the code to change it. And thankfully, the funny part about all this is if we look at the final results, the actual change to the file was 1, 2, 3 lines that we added or modified, and one change to a models file. And that was it. The rest of the stuff that we did was all about making the test suite better and more maintainable for the future, because I expect that this particular view is going to be the hub of my application, and I want the test for this area to be manageable. So we have our test that proved it out, which became pretty short in the end, showing that it's doing the date setup, it's creating a user, it's creating the student and the grade level for all the enrollment, and creating the specific course that's important to this particular test by having that no days attribute, and then checking that thing is in fact empty. And the rest of it is all the cleanup. So if you're a big fan of red and a diff, I've got red in spades tonight. So that's, I think, where I want to end it for the evening. Thank y'all for joining in. Again, this stuff is, as that Northern Monkey pointed out, this stuff is put up on YouTube after I'm done. I also try and put together generally some abbreviated show notes of the highlights of what I'm talking about. But if you missed anything and you want to look at more, no problem. Happy that you were able to join in. It will be on YouTube when it's available. I am MB Lehman on Twitter, and if you want to follow my mailing list, which I have, I write about Python. I write extensively about Django. I'm doing a big, gigantic, what will be a gigantic series on Django, covering the whole web framework. I'm 5 things in, but it's going to be a beast. It's going to be probably 30 plus articles, and each of these is like 3,000 words ideally. So there's going to be a lot going on there. So there's tons of ways you can find out more and get in touch with me. you can sign up right here if you want. So again, thank you all for joining in, and I'll see you next time. Take care.